Wow, there we go. Fantastic. So we are recording this, so we'll be able to post it for people to view later. And we thank you so much for being here. We have us in person here at the restaurant, and then we have you guys that are streaming with us. As you know, we do our social portion at 6:15. We do testing our AV, and then we do our presentation, and then we try to wrap up between 7:30 and 7:45, just depending. But we always meet the second Thursday of every month. So we're really glad to have you guys with us. First, some news and updates about the Big Valley Beekeepers Guild. The first thing is, yes, we are still accepting memberships. We accept them year round. It's only $20 a year. It is a calendar year. So that means every January is when we'll kind of do our push to get memberships. Spouses can join as well. So for those kinds of memberships, it's $30 in total. And we really invite you to become a member to help support us if you haven't already. We'd like to give a shout out and thanks to Village Coffee Shop here on Lodi Avenue in Lodi. That's where we're eating now. They give us the space for free. So as you can tell on the camera, we have some great eats. I think everyone's got some great food tonight. We're also recruiting for a director in waiting, and that's because we have 2 positions coming up at the end of the year that will be vacancies. And so we would love to get directors in waiting to join us so that they can learn the ropes. So if you're interested in that, please definitely reach out to us, send us an email, because we'd love to talk to you more about what that looks like. It's really not that bad. All right. So also in October, so our next meeting, we're going to have a honey tasting contest. So everyone should be sure to watch their emails for more information and the details on how to enter. This is something that we haven't done. We didn't do last year because of COVID. So now with the first year we did, it was a huge success. And we got to see and taste honeys from all over. So our meeting in October is, I should check this date because I think I have it at the end of my slides. But we are doing that honey tasting contest. So look for more info either on the Facebook page or an email coming out soon. So exciting stuff. Today's meeting is sponsored by Paul Lockhart. Paul supported us with a $15 donation to sponsor our Zoom meeting. So we're super appreciative of him doing that. If you're interested in sponsoring a meeting, let us know and we'll make arrangements for you to send us $15 and we'll announce a thank you to you at our next meeting. So thank you so much. So today's meeting, I know we don't have a whole lot of folks on, which actually might be great for this kind of meeting. We are going to talk about fall bee chores and we're going to do a round table discussion. So I'm going to go sit with the group. The way this will work is we need it to definitely be interactive. So those of you on Zoom or live streaming, we'll be looking for you to interact, ask questions, raise your hand, unmute, because it really should be a discussion. But we're going to be talking with everything from extracting honey to robbing and feeding. And especially, what that looks like for us in the San Joaquin Valley as well as elsewhere. And some of the things we want to make sure we at least touch on a little bit tonight is extracting honey, mite washes, robbing prevention, feeding, and then just making sure that we have queen right colonies. Boy, that's a mouthful. Before we go into the fall months. So at least that's the plan. And what you should do if you discover that she's missing. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. And I'm just going to go ahead. I'm actually going to stop so that we can get everybody on our screen. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and admit we have a couple more coming in. There we go. All right, perfect. So let's see. So first of all, any questions so far? Okay, I'm not hearing anybody, so I'm going to take that as a we're good to get started. All right, very good. So let's first talk about extracting honey. And I'm going to have the little speaker thing around. I don't know how we're going to pass it, but we'll figure it out. So let's ask this. how many of you, by a show of hands or just by unmuting yourself and those of you in the room, how many of you guys have already extracted your honey this year? I have a no, I have a couple of yeses. I know I'm doing mine next week. How about everybody in the Zoom meeting? You want to go ahead and unmute yourself?
This is Michael Olson. I have.
Oh, wait, say that again.
This is Michael Olson, and I have extracted my honey.
Oh, very good. Thank you, Michael.
I got about half as much as I did last year.
Oh, wow. Okay. Got it. And I see Jessica. Jessica says yes. They've extracted some honey. Let's see. Anybody else? Barb, Brad, Chuck.
Chuck is a no.
Chuck is a no. Chuck, when do you normally extract? When do you usually go in?
Usually with the dead outs in December or so, and then the colonies that survive probably in May.
Oh, got it. Okay. And that's right. Because you're up at a higher elevation, right?
Yeah.
What's your elevation?
1,200 feet at rescue.
Oh, okay. Got it. That's not too much higher. So that's very good. So I know that those of us here in the, those of us here in the valley, typically the rule of thumb is to try and extract by Labor Day weekend. I know I'm running late. I'm going to be extracting this weekend. Let's see. Dave, when did you extract?
I got 8 frames early July, and I know I've got 2 more supers in the backyard, which will be in the next couple of weeks.
Oh, got it. Okay, so Dave Marson, so he extracts at different times throughout the year, just whenever you have honey available, basically. Does that sound right? Okay,
Yeah.
all right, got it.
Why don't you wait until the spring, or after the winter and everything, so they have enough to eat through the winter and then extract after? Why do you extract it in the fall before the winter?
Oh, well, that's because you don't have to extract all the honey that's in the hive. You can actually leave them some. Yeah. Dave just said his brew boxes have plenty of honey. So you definitely don't want to extract all of your honey. I think the goal is to just, you want to make sure you leave at least, is the rule of thumb at least 4 to 5 frames per deep?
1 box, 1 upper per deep.
Oh, there you go. 1 upper per deep. So as long as you don't extract more than, or you make sure you leave that for the bees, you're good.
So the bees during winter, they'll start out on the lower box. That cluster will start out kind of in the middle, and as the season goes on, they work their way upwards. And so if you leave your honey super on there, you're going to end up with a honey super full of bees and larvae. And they store excess. That's what allows us to take the honey. So you're also reducing the dead air space inside the hive by taking extra supers off. So there's multiple different reasons. I know, Justin, you've got the ware hive. I am not familiar with ware, but I'm sure the concepts are the same.
Yeah. Concepts are the same. That was thank you, Paul. That was exactly what I wanted.
All right, good deal. So let's see. So any tips? Does anybody have tips on extracting? Like as far as, so one tip that I learned this morning is remember that those supers are really heavy, and it's always helpful to have a second person, especially if you're short like me. I used a stepping stool, and I have 3 supers on actually 3 of the hives. And by the time, there was a couple of moments where it was a little precarious, and I was about to create a disaster with lifting those off myself. Oh, wait, Mark has something.
Is that another? What was on Facebook? One of the groups was talking about somebody had tried to pull off their super, and left it open.
Oh.
And they said they couldn't brush off enough bees fast enough and the whole super, you could tell they got scared about it. So they left it out and the whole super got robbed out.
Oh, no.
So that's the part to miss, that's missing, is make sure that when you pull either the frames or the supers, you have to cover them up top and bottom. Because you're new, you do things slowly, right? Before you know it, you've got bees everywhere. Right, so you'll start robbing, and once the robbing starts, you really should just shut everything down, do it a different day. So.
That's exactly. No, that's awesome. So that's exactly what I was worried about, because I had to take, so I was taking my honey supers off this morning in order to put the escape board on. So there was a period of time where it was exposed and I was worried about other bees. Luckily, I did it fast enough that it wasn't an issue. I did have one honey super get stuck where I had to use one of those rope saw things because the frames were connected between two supers. And I forgot to bring it. So I literally had to put the top on one, run back, go get it, come back. And it was still okay, but it was a little precarious. Yeah, those things are heavy. Even if they're medium supers, they're 10 frames. Oh my gosh, they can get heavy. So any other tips here in the room or on the chat or in the Zoom meeting on extracting? What about temperature? Like what temperature should it be when you're extracting?
About 90 degrees if you can make it. Nobody wants to do it in 90-degree weather. But if you've got an indoor temperature, way to heat up a little room that you're doing extraction in, it's really easy in our area because it's hot outside. You just do it somewhere where it stays hot. So if you've got a shack that you've turned into a honey house, perfect. It's going to be blazing hot inside anyway. And the other thing is, if you are not going to extract the same day you pull frames off, supers off, you want to keep those hot or warm, not hot, but warm. If you wait a couple of days, you put them somewhere, in storage and it drops down to 60 degrees, 50, 70, somewhere in there, it's going to be like trying to extract gum as opposed to liquid, right? So then you have to figure out how to reheat it, and it doesn't do that quickly. So you're going to have to, what we've talked about before, you have to make a room like a closet or something that you have supers in, and then heat up the closet for about 2-3 days. It'll take to get back up to 90, and then you can extract, and it'll be super easy once you get it warm. Somebody back there?
Paul speaking of Mite, but Paul,
Let's ask some questions.
Paul actually had a suggestion last year and I took advantage of it, because I had to extract outside. I don't have a space inside. So I have a pop-up, or they probably can't hear me, but here. So we have a pop-up tent. So Paul had a suggestion last year, and I think it was Paul, or maybe it was Michael. I think Michael might have found the link. It was Paul. Okay. That to get some netting to put around the outside of a pop-up tent. And it actually worked pretty well. But I was surprised at how quickly I had bees buzzing outside of that netting, like how quickly they picked up on the honey. So yeah. Do you have any more tips about that, Paul?
Just make sure you stake it down to stake the netting down to the ground, because they'll find their way under it, around it, over it.
Anyway, yeah.
That's it.
I can't put it next to you while you chew.
Thank you. Oh, all right. So how about everybody that's in the Zoom meeting? Why don't you go ahead and unmute yourselves and maybe talk about some of your extraction tips.
This is Brad. All I had to do was buy a very expensive piece of 3/4 inch plywood to mount my extractor on so it didn't vibrate me off the floor.
Good deal. No, that's exactly what Dave Marson and I were talking about. Wave, Dave. Because we both got the same extractor a couple months ago. And so he's already used his. I have not used mine. I'll use it this weekend. So, but we were debating on, he was actually helping me quite a bit to try and figure out how to anchor it, because it's not an easy extractor to move around. Hi, Ernie. And there's, yeah, it was going to take some doing. So the
So
idea is, oh, go
I
ahead.
mounted some stove head bolts coming through the backside of the piece of the 3/4 inch ply, and with some double nuts and washers. So the plywood just can lay against the garage wall when you're not using it. And then when you need it, you just lay it down and drop the extractor on and put the top nuts on.
Oh, good deal. Good deal. Thank you for that. All right. Help. Oh, here, Paul has a. So Paul is saying that he, remember to point the frames in the right direction, depending on the type of extractor that you have. So the type that I have and that Dave have, is it called a radial? It's a radial extractor. What's the other type of extractor? Wait, say that one more time. Tangential. I'm not saying that right, but anyhow. Oh gosh, tangential. I don't forget. So we'll so radial, you want the top of the frames to be faced, the top bar to be faced outwards towards the actual wall of the outer wall of the extractor. Okay. Now with the other ones, there's a trick because you have to reverse them, right? Which I here hand this to Paul because of this.
Speaking from experience, if you're using a tangential extractor, now you got me doing it. Go slow. Don't turn it on, put the frame in there and then turn it up to full speed right away, because you're going to blow all that wax right off that frame. I've done it. It's not as bad with if you have plastic foundation, but it could still happen. So the way I was doing it, the extractor I used this year was tangential. Yes, tangential. And I would put the frame in, I would turn it up to a slow speed. I'd stop it, I'd flip it, turn it up a little bit more. And I probably took it out and flipped it probably 2 to 3 times, just to keep from blowing out the wax. Because you want to save as much of that comb as you can. That puts you that much further ahead the following year when you put that back on another hive.
How much uncapping?
So that's the other thing. This year, a friend of mine recommended, she has a technique. She uses, it's like a paint roller, but with a bunch of spikes in it. And I've tried it before and I didn't really like it that much, but I tried it again this year. And that's going to be my go-to from now on. So you puncture all the caps with that, and it removes very little wax. So most of the comb is left intact. And when you go to filter it through or strain it, there's less wax. So my technique this year was use the roller, put it in, flip it several times. I drained that into a bucket because I used to, when I drained it, I would drain it through a strainer right away. And this last year, I didn't do that. I drained it straight out of the extractor into my white bucket. And once that bucket was full, I let it sit in the sun for a little bit to warm up. I mean, it was already warm, but that wax will float to the top. So now when you open that gate, it's most of the honey that comes out until you get to that wax layer, most of it's going to be wax free. Because that wax will clog your strainer. And so I wanted to get as much honey out of it as I could before I had to clean that wax out of the strainer. And it worked really well. Yeah. I have a little battle wound.
Oh, guy.
And I won't tell you how I did it, but let's just say it was a pressure washer accident.
Oh, no.
Pressure washers
On your foot?
on my arm.
Oh, I got the foot.
All right, you guys, how about you? Have you extracted yet? Are you going to?
Not this year, no. I don't think so.
Okay. All right. No problem. All right. Okay. Anything else? Anybody in the Zoom that wants to share about their extraction tips or techniques?
This is Chuck.
Oh,
I
good.
do
Hi,
top
Chuck.
bars, so I'm strictly crush and strain, but I think maybe 30 pounds a year is about all I do.
Wow, very good. Okay, and so what's the crush technique and the strain?
So, so first thing you do is you cut the comb off of the top bars, and I put it in a Tupperware. I freeze it for at least 48 hours, if not 4 months,
Oh,
till I get enthused to crush the honey and strain it. And essentially, what I do is I take the Tupperware, set it in the shade outside during the summer, and once it starts feeling warm, after it's unfrozen, I go and I basically take a knife and slice the comb up, and then I pour it into a colander that has a paint strainer, a 1 gallon paint strainer that I've washed, and let it seep through the paint strainer and the colander into a Tupperware bowl, and then I pour it into my jars.
oh, wow. Okay, good deal.
And when you get to the end of it with the wax, you basically pull the paint strainer out and squeeze it down and get that last little bit of honey out. And it's usually pretty frothy and got a lot of stuff in it. So I usually try to save that for bottles all on its own. But it's it probably should be filtered, but I just have it anyway, the way it is.
Oh, got it. No, that's okay. And that's the thing, I think people forget how much honey is actually left over, like how much you can actually get out of that, whether you're uncapping or whatever it might be. It's worth straining.
I ended up getting about 3 pounds
Oh, wow.
per medium frame.
Paul just said that he gets about 3 pounds of honey from the, oh, okay. Per medium frame. Okay. Got it. Good deal.
I could have brought one.
Oh, hold on. Mark has.
A lot of people open up their hives and they have, not all the honey is capped. And one of the questions I get a lot is can I extract it if it's not capped? So Mark's going to answer that.
Yeah, I can. I mean, we've got really dry conditions here. If this was Florida, then no, you never can.
Wow.
It's got to be, well, you have a dehydrator and everything goes along with that. So wait, what a pain in the neck that is. We have, I don't know, in our summertime, what do we have, like 15% humidity, right? Not quite the desert, real close. And so if you're trying to get under 18.5% moisture, so that's just the amount of water that's in the honey. You're trying to get underneath that. You don't have that much problem in our area because there's just not any moisture in the air. Because if you leave honey out, you can't get it dry just by leaving it out. It'll suck all the moisture that's in the air into itself, which is why you have to keep your jars of honey sealed shut for that reason. If you were to leave it open, you just have to wait a certain amount of time, then you'll start to smell the fermentation because it pulls enough water in, then it starts to make mead, basically, starts to make wine. So in our neck of the woods, it's not as big an issue. So if you have a little bit of wet capped or wet looking cappings, you should be fine. You're trying to get as many that you can that are actually capped. You can see the wax on the outside. So, I think the question comes up a lot. Do I want to extract all these frames or just the ones that have them capped? Generally, just all the ones you haven't capped and just go with that and leave the others one way or another for the bees they probably won't finish it. If they're not done by now, I don't think they're going to finish it. There's generally in my neck of the woods, there's nothing. Maybe if you're in Sacramento or middle of Lodi here, there's a possibility you might make a bunch more honey between now and the end of the year. But if you're out in the country, like where you live, where I live, this is it, we're done. So you might have a whole bunch more pollen, but as far as nectar, it's done. So yeah, that's the question.
Thank you.
I had,
Sorry, thank you.
I have my refractometer, but I forgot to bring it. I didn't think about it.
Oh, that's okay.
What things to bring?
Katie's on that. So Katie,
Katie, do you have your fractometer available by chance that you could show us?
I do not, unfortunately. It is packed away.
Oh, that's okay. Paul pointed you out.
I did use it this year and it did come in handy for the uncapped frames though. So any frames that I have that are still not capped, I definitely used that.
Perfect. That's a great tip. How many of you have fractometers? Am I seeing that correctly? Refractometers. How many of you have those that you keep in your beekeeping kit? Just a show of hands or unmute yourselves. Yeah.
you don't want to go too cheap. Just make sure you get the right one.
Oh, make sure. Barb, did you say you have one? Oh, you're muted.
I'm wondering what it is. I don't have any idea.
Oh, no problem. I bet Michael's really good at, he might be able to find a link and post it so people can see the picture. So,
Sure.
Mike,
I
are
will
you
look
available?
right now. I'll
Oh,
look.
awesome. Yay. All right. Very good. There's, so yeah, you can buy them on Amazon. I think the key is they're actually not that expensive, but you don't want to buy like the cheapest one, but they're about 20 bucks, I'd say. Right? Is that about good? Like you can get an okay one for 20 bucks and it'll basically tell you, it takes a little bit of doing because I remember reading the instructions and trying to calibrate it, but I don't know if they come calibrated. I know I had to, they don't. So I know I used olive oil to calibrate mine because it was something I read online, but you can, once you get it calibrated, you can, yeah.
Came with the actual oil.
Oh, Mark's came with the actual oil. Oh, mineral oil. Okay. There we go.
I think you can buy the real oil online, just refractometer calibration oil. But I have seen that a lot saying olive oil. But
Olive
then
oil might work, or yeah,
olive oil might be
too heavy.
different.
Yes, olive oil can be different. So once you have it calibrated, then you can use it kind of as an effective tool to verify your percentage of water in the honey. So what were you going to say, Katie?
Also, make sure you get a honey one, not a brewing refractometer. They are very different.
Good point. Good point. All right, good deal. And here you go. Michael just posted in the chat a link from Wikipedia about what that is. So take a look at that. It's a handy tool. It's I don't know. I don't use mine too often, but it sounds like it's good to use on the frames that aren't capped.
That's a general rule, as long as it's 70, at least 70%.
Okay.
If 70% of my frames are capped, I extract it.
Okay. All right. All right. Anything else about about extraction? My voice is going. I think we're good. All right. I think if you have any more questions, go ahead and put them in the chat, but we're going to move forward too. And I'll have Paul or Mark take us on maybe start us out on our next topic. Whitewashes. There you go.
Might watch.
Might
Okay,
watch.
so look, we have a list.
Yeah.
Okay.
You have a list. So the idea is to just touch base on each of these if we can, if we have time. So part of the reason, and his food just got
My
served.
food just got here, so
It
it might be Paul.
All right. So mite washes, for whatever reason, tend to, I don't know if controversial is the right word, but there's a lot of people that their first thing they want to, they don't want to kill 300 bees. And what you need to keep in mind is naturally, probably at least 1,000 bees die a day of natural causes. So killing another 300, you're not really hurting. You're not harming your hive in any way. Right. Yeah, you get, that's the other thing to remember is in the peak of the season, the queen's laying up to 2,000 eggs a day. So again, I'm a Star Wars, or not Star Wars, Star Trek geek. And what was that scene where Spock, he's sacrificed himself for, yeah.
The needs of the many outweigh the needs of
Yes.
the few. Or
Thank
the
you.
one.
I knew I could count on you, Michael.
Yep, I got you. I got your back.
So you're sacrificing a few for the better of the hive. And the most, yeah, oh yeah, yeah. The most common method for doing that is it used to be an alcohol wash, which you can still do using plain old, I think Randy Oliver, I think recommends what, 90% alcohol for best results. Yes, yeah. So, yes. Yeah, you can still use the alcohol wash, but Randy Oliver, since because of COVID, alcohol became scarce, hard to find. Yeah, you can get it now. Yeah. And don't waste your good vodka. But so Randy came up with, did a bunch of experimentation. In fact, if you go to our last meeting with Randy, he talks about the mite washes with dish detergent. And with the dish detergent, you basically, it's 2 tablespoons of Dawn to a gallon of water. And you use it just like you would normally use alcohol, but you don't shake it. You swirl it for a minute and do your mite count. And he came up with another idea where you use a makeup mirror underneath the jar, because with the suds on the top, you can't really count the mites. So he uses, I think it was an 8-inch makeup mirror to count the mites, and it works really well. So if you're really dead set against killing 300 bees, you can do a sugar shake. I don't do it. I'm not familiar. I can't describe how to do it. So you if that's what you're going to do, go watch some YouTube videos. Different times of the year, like if I did a mite wash and I had 3 mites in May, it wouldn't be a big deal. 3 mites this time of year is a bigger deal because the bee population is dropping, the mite population is still high. So, but there's different, what do they call that, thresholds? So about 3%, it's starting to become problematic. Less than 3 at 2, you still probably want to treat, but you're okay for a little bit. At 1%, again, keep an eye on them. You might have to do a oxalic acid treatment or something in December, but you're good to go for a while.
And that's why we like for us in the valley. So for us in the valley, can you guys hear me if I go like this? Thumbs up. I know we're trying to test our microphone out. Okay, so the reason for us in the valley that we remove our honey super so quickly is so that we can get in there and treat the mites before we run into really horrible problems.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Okay, that's what I wanted to connect the two. Okay. All right. Yeah. All right.
Wash
Any
this thing.
questions? Ask them if there's any questions.
Anybody have questions? Anybody want to add anything?
Anything about your Dave? Dave, have you?
Mark?
You might want to watch it. Okay. Do you know what your mic count is? Are you going to look to see what your mic count is? Go close again.
Yes and no. If I get in there, because I'm usually in and out pretty quick. If I can get in there and do a real good look, then I will. But I usually go in commando, just avail. So they're pretty docile, but every now and then they get a little bit pissy. I think the last time I was in there, I got hit about 8 times. It's like, nope, this is enough.
Yeah. They don't get too upset doing white washes, right? It's just a good way to see where your hives are, like as far as that light level.
Michael and his wife, when they came down, they did it for me. And I did not get a really good chance because they were systematic. They had a system, they went and they did it real quick. And I really didn't get a good visual on what was being done. I'm the kind of guy, hands-on, let me see what you're doing, let me do it. You give it to me and say, here, you do it. It's like, I'm lost.
Lesson learned. So that way, next time, Dave, you're going to do it. And we're going to watch you.
It actually turned out real good when they did it. It was very, very well kept.
Good.
I don't know what it is about my location, but I've got very, very little black hive beetles. And I don't really see, when I do look, I don't really see any mites. Everything is always low. I do look, but when I do, I don't remember the last time I seen a black hive beetle in there.
Black hive.
I've never seen hive beetles in my house.
Yeah,
not-
I haven't
never.
either.
So, yeah, knock on wood.
But I think, and Paul, make sure, I don't know if everybody can hear me this way. Sorry, Paul's gonna keep it run around. So the key though too is that if you're seeing mites, that's usually a sign that it's too late, right? So you don't want to see mites. If you can see them with your eye, you can see them running around, and sometimes you can even take some like drone comb, like, and cut it open if you see mites in there, because they love drones. That'll, you don't want to be able to see them. You want to be proactive as much as you can. So that's.
Usually I get a real good view when I pull the top box off and it opens up the larva comb and you can see the larva in there. I get a real good view that way. I don't see anything.
You don't see anything.
I do look throughout to see if I see anything on the bees. I don't see anything, but my eyes are pretty bad, so who knows?
Is it? Dave said his eyes are. His eyes are. Sometimes it's hard to see him. So who knows? You have to get really close. All right. So, there was a bigger question apparently in the chat. Did Mark order the chicken fried steak? He did apparently. Yes. Kara. All right. So really, I think the overall, like as far as fall chores with your bees, you want to proactively be monitoring your mites and treating for them. And that's because right now the number of your bees are going down, but the number of mites is still really high. And if that's the case with your colony, your bees they're probably not going to make it through the winter. Is that what you would say?
How many people know what winter bees are?
There we go. Raise your hands. We're watching the chat too.
Does everybody know and understand what winter bees are?
Yes, but I want to hear you explain it as well.
What's that?
I do, but I want to hear you explain it as well.
Thanks, Michael. So winter bees are, it's basically a worker bee, but so your average worker bee during summer lives about what, 6 weeks, 5 to 7 weeks, maybe?
Yeah, so worker bee, I would say like 45 days.
Yeah. So an average worker bee lives 45 days during the like late spring, summer into fall. But as you go into fall and nectar and pollen become scarce, they will start turning into what's called a winter bee. And that winter bee lives anywhere from 4 to 5 months. And the difference is that the vitigelin, right? You have a but anyway, so it's vitigelin stores. The bodies create more vitigelin. Is that, am I saying that right, Mark? And that allows them to live 5 to 6 months, which is necessary because the queen will stop and slow down and stop laying. And so the bees that exist already need to live longer to get that hive through winter. So they create what's called a winter bee. And so the whole point in getting the mite load down is the mites vector viruses throughout the hive. And if you don't get rid of the viruses or knock the viruses down as much as possible before they start creating those winter bees, then they're not going to be as healthy through winter, and your hives stand a better chance of surviving if you get the viruses knocked down before they start creating the winter bees.
This picture goes right into what we were just looking at. So I took this picture probably sometime in winter, one of the winters. So the bottom bee there is the queen that I found in the middle. These are all dead. That is a doornail. But you can see this is Varroa mite syndrome. So they're down to such a small amount that's left over that they're just trying to survive. And you can find this even on frames where on the outside is just plenty of honey, but they're too small to move. They can't keep warm enough to move to where the food is. So this isn't they starved kind of thing. Everyone looks at this and they always go, it's starved. My bees starved, but your boxes are full of honey. They just couldn't move because they've dwindled down. And Varroa by themselves are not that big of a deal. They vector though, so they make little entry holes. And the thing that's important to understand about insects is lower. Yeah. Okay. The thing about insects is that they're not like us. I put a hole in my arm and it'll fill itself back up. It'll heal. Whereas an insect a lot of time will just live with a hole. Right. So after you've made an injury point, that's now a point where anything can get into because they only live a certain amount of time. They're not all about trying to live forever. So the bees in a hive are a lot like the cells in your body. So when we do those mite washes, right, it's like going to your doctor and getting a blood sample. You're not getting that blood back, right? Your body's not getting that blood back, but it has plenty of blood in your body to be able to do a sample. Same thing when you're doing a mite wash. So if you're thinking about how to keep the hive alive, trying to diagnose what's going on, it's the same thing as going to the doctor. And so when they make a puncture in, they're not only making a problem for your bee, but they're also transmitting like a dirty needle walking around the hive. So you got a lot of these diseases they're not a big disease for bees. They shouldn't be populated through the hive. They should kill off a couple of bees. They die off, the disease is gone, right? But it's moving it all around. So now you have this tiny little problem that becomes this huge problem. So then you get that eventually. And then eventually you go back in and you look, oh, I've got problems like this. I've got moth, all the moths, they took out my hive. No, the hive was gone and the moths moved in, right? So the moths are just squatters. They come in afterwards. So yeah, that's that. I'm doing this right now. This is my favorite for this time of year. I try not to use the same thing. So I only use it once a year if I use it at all. But when I do all of them. So whether that falls into a good IPM program or not, but it's because the bees move around to each hive. So if I get to the point where enough of them need it, I'm doing all of them at the same time. And this is a very long treatment, this particular one, Apivar. So this is Amitraz, this is 5 to 7 weeks. You leave this stuff in. Then you do want to pull it out, otherwise that Amitraz will stop working, right? So you don't want to leave it in there. But so Amitraz, this you're not going to do this time of year. This stuff's great. I love formic acid, but it's only spring for us because by the time it's cool enough here, you've waited way too long to do any kind of mite treatment. So I only get to use formic in spring before it's like 85 degrees. That's like March, April for us, right? So that's when I use formic. After that, it's just too hot and you're going to burn up a whole hive trying to keep them alive. And then I didn't put any more pictures on that kind of stuff in here. This is all the pictures I had for this. So thymol is great right now. I don't have any. Apigard, Apple Life Var. What am I leaving out? There's two of the two of those. Those are the main two. Yeah, Apple Life Var is like strips. They look sort of like that, sort of. Not quite hard plastic like that, but they're a strip. And then the tub, which I can find a picture in a minute. The tub, or you just get a your own little tin and you use a spatula and make. That's if you get enough hives. I don't know how many people here have enough hives to worry about the big tub, but the little, they look like you're feeding fancy feast for your cat. You peel off the tin, put it on the top of the hive, and it's generally one per hive. You want to have space at the top, so I think Michael is doing this right now. Is that right, Michael?
Yes.
Yeah, so he had some shims that he put on, so he had room, right? And then the lid goes on top of the shim, so it's just space on the top. And then the bees get themselves into the actual paste. That's how it disappears. And yeah, it does fume, but they also move it throughout the hive. So in trying to get rid of it, they actually get it all over each other. And that's one of the ways it works. So
My experience with Apigard. My
I'll
experience
take
with
some more.
Apigard is that your queen will stop laying. So just be aware of that. Sometimes when you're done with treating with Apigard, you really want to, in fact, I've even in the past fed pollen patties at the same time because that helps get your queen restarted. And I've had years where the queen stopped and she didn't start laying again and I lost that hive. And I know a few other people that have had that same experience. That's one of the reasons I switched to the AP Life bar. I don't know if it's better, but just anecdotally, it seems to be better.
Yeah. All right, Paul, take us. No, because you.
oh, you take us, yeah.
Paul, take us to the next one. So ask everybody if there's any more questions about
I'm supposed to ask, does anybody have any more questions about mite washes? Or
I have a
mites?
question. So if I use the, I have some Apigard trays. So do I put them like on top of the frames?
I know Michael has a spacer shim on top. Michael, you have it on top of 2 deep boxes?
Yes.
Okay. In the past, I've taken my 2 deep boxes, I've opened one up, stuck it right in the middle and put the deep box right back on top of it. And it's always worked for me that way. So you could do it either way.
Okay. And what about if I only have one box, one super? And
Half dose,
what is it?
maybe do a half dose.
Half dose? Okay.
Yeah, which might be kind of problematic if you're going to do, because those trays, that's a full dose, I believe, right?
Right.
Apigard? Yeah,
It is.
the gel. Yeah, the trays basically is a full dose, which is meant for 2 deeps.
Oh,
I did I have 2 1-boxers and I went ahead and I just did a full dose.
Okay.
That one I might recommend you do the spacer shim with.
Yeah.
I see. Okay. So can I scoop out some of the gel to leave it like half
No,
dose?
no, I wouldn't bother. Just take
No?
Michael, what is it, about a 2-inch spacer?
Yeah,
Two
it's it's just to kind of just give them room to access the gel.
Right.
So and they sell them at Dayton, or you can make them yourself.
Okay. All right,
Now-
but you
go
were
ahead.
saying that that it's too much one tray for my boxes
Well, I'm doing a full dose on 1-boxes.
on one box. Okay.
Yeah. So if that proves detrimental, I'll let everybody know. But I don't. I mean, there's even a temperature threshold where it's supposed to be, I think, 90 or below. but it was trying to find a time frame where that was, and it was for a couple days, and now it's in like in the hundreds. So
For Apigard, it's actually 104 degrees.
oh, is it okay?
Yeah, 104.
Oh, okay.
And I've actually used it hotter than that and not had a problem. So
Yeah.
Okay.
You got to put something on this time of year, and the first 3 days is when you're going to get the biggest
The
hit
flash.
to the hive. So, yeah, flash. So
Yeah, it's supposed to be like in the like lower 90s, hopefully from here on out. But
yeah,
who knows?
Katie's got an interesting situation. She has her hives up in Placerville where they've had all the fires and all the smoke, and I know she's doing half dose treatments right now. Are you, Katie? Are you going to put a full dose on when you go back to check them, or?
I'm contemplating that. So I was doing a half dose weekly instead of the full dose every 2 weeks.
Okay.
So tomorrow I may just give them the full dose now that the smoke is settled. Has anyone else dealt with smoke and treatments?
And it doesn't.
Bueller?
So
Bueller?
what is the effect of treating, and there's smoke in the air? I mean, is it that they don't take out it doesn't flash as fast, or they don't remove the chemical as fast, or what's?
Well, they're spending most of the time inside the hive probably with all that smoke.
Okay.
They're not as much, there's not as much.
I would say
foraging going
stress.
on. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay, that was my only question. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, take us into Paul, do you want to take us into robbing prevention?
Robbing. So has anybody had experience with robbing or had hives robbed?
It was really bad last year. I had for me and for people that I was helping, they had hives robbed out.
Yeah,
Actually completely.
I had a
gone.
hive robbed out. It's usually the weaker hives are the ones you have to really worry about. If it's a strong hive, they're usually strong enough to protect themselves, and it's usually not an issue. But if you have a weak hive, you definitely want to put a robbing screen on it, or have one. I would suggest just going ahead and putting one on, because it's not a question of if, but when. I had a hive that was robbed out last year. I was kind of standing there when it happened, and by the time I was able to get my jacket on and get the top of the hive off, I was pulling frames trying to find the queen. Found the queen. They had balled her and were stinging her, and she was gone. And so it happens fast, and it's vicious. So if you have weak hives, I would get some robbing screens on there as soon as possible.
And usually the robbing screens sell out at whatever time of year that you need them most. So I always
Right.
encourage people to get. I mean, if you buy a hive, buy a robbing screen with it, because this year I was extra just cautious, and I was observing a lot more just to and I put them on earlier than ever, and I knew that one of my hives, or a few of them, were having issues with robbing, so it does make a big difference.
Yeah. Mark, did you have something you wanted to?
If anyone can see that. There's a ton of different robbing screens you can get. Yeah. Paul's sick of talking. I have these. I don't have the plastic ones that Paul has.
I have them, and I've kind of gone back to this style. They seem to not be able to find their way back in with those white ones, but I'm going to try it again. But I always end up with, because I have screened bottoms on all my hives, and I put the white. They're made by Better Bee or something like that, and instead of going back into the entrance through the robbing screen, they all went underneath my hive onto the screen bottom. So I had to,
screen bottoms
yeah,
cause problems sometimes there.
right. Yeah. So if you're going to put the robbing screens on, you might want to close up, and you have screened bottoms, you might want to close them off.
If you have a screen bottom, then you can probably get away with just making a really small opening right? Like close off the opening
Yeah.
to finger width. I'm, what's that? Couple pencils wide. I don't know how to say it, like an inch. So the smallest opening on an actual reducing entrance reducer. Generally, you would time of year, but if it's between robbing and thinking your hive's getting too hot, go for robbing, right? Because when they start robbing, there's good luck. You won't be there too when it's happening. Rarely you're going to be there, and all of a sudden, they'll take out even some of the big hives. So I have 100 hives at each location, and then I've got hives in every direction that are not mine, every direction of me in both locations. So anything is left out. You want to talk about bees there. So yeah, when it hits, and that's the problem this type of year, we're removing honey, or maybe you don't have honey in the hives and you're starting to think, I need to feed. Like I'm feeding like crazy right now because I need something different than most folks here. I need my hives to be crammed when we get into winter. And you can't feed and then have robbing at the same time. Feeding will cause robbing at this time of year too. So this year I have just really started on the ones that I know are weaker. Is putting some sort of reducer, even on my pallets, I can just reduce the entrance to just the smallest opening. I mean, just enough for bees to be able to get in and out. That right now I'm doing. On the bigger ones, I'm waiting until it looks like it's a problem. Then I'll put it on there because there's a whole bunch of bees on the outside every night. But once I add feed to a weak hive, I've basically killed it. If I don't put on something, it's dead. It'll be dead in a couple of days because I've got so many hives in one spot. And so folks that are in our area, not so much residential again, but like your area, you won't know until all of a sudden somebody moved bees in, a couple of properties over, and all of a sudden you have bees like crazy robbing your hive. That's what happened. Somebody came from out of state early, put their bees down, and they didn't let you know or anybody else know, right? And all of a sudden, same thing happens when you're trying to make honey and all of a sudden it stops coming in. So, yeah.
That brings us, talk to everybody and tell them that brings us right into
Feeding.
We have just about 15 minutes left.
Okay, feeding. Hold that and tell everyone,
Feed your bees.
I got a little bit on robbing for like Nad. This is Chuck. What I do, I've done it for 2 years on my Langstrasse. I have a telescoping entrance with screen bottom boards. And what I've found is that the robbers and the wasps all go to the screen bottom board, and they won't go through the telescoping entrance. And it's worked for 6+ years on my top bars. I've got the same setup with the telescoping entrance and screen bottoms, and I have yet to have a robbing problem.
Can you post pictures of that or something to show folks what you're talking about as far as the telescoping entrance? You post them on the Big Valley Beekeepers page.
Okay. Yeah, and it's basically from
or just a link in the chat so we can see what that looks like. Because I'm curious too.
Phil Chandler from Barefoot Beekeeper, BioBees. He does them for his top bar hives, but I adapted them so that I use them for Langstraffs too. So let me find a picture.
Yeah, I'd like to give that a try. What else? Was I supposed to be talking about something else? Feeding?
Feeding. So what are you feeding?
Thank you, Chuck. So feeding, there's a couple things you need to be probably feeding some pollen patties right now, especially for mites. Like I said, a lot of these mite treatments can cause the queen to stop or slow way down. So you want to start getting some pollen in there and getting those Vitagel and fat bodies built up in the bees, get the hive strength up. So definitely be feeding a good quality pollen patty. And then what I generally do is I lift the top box, and it's just kind of a gut feel. If it's heavy, then I know I'm good for the winter. If it's light, I know I probably need to feed. That's another reason I take my honey supers off early, because with your honey supers on, they're storing all that honey in your honey supers. So, and they're not putting it in the supers that are going to be there for them during winter. So I like to get my honey supers off earlier, so that now that box that's left for them, like the whatever they're bringing in, they're storing it for themselves. You can feed 2-to-1 they recommend for the fall, but whatever you give them, they're going to take it and they're going to use it.
What's an easy way to make 2-to-1?
I have a 5-gallon bucket. I take a 30-pound bag of sugar I get from Costco, dump it in there, take it in the front yard. The hose has been sitting in the sun all day, so I fill it full of water from the hose, which is hot, and feed that to the bees. I'm not sure if it's 1-to-1, 2-to-1, or something in between, but they like it.
So that's why, so like, for me, the one-to-one or the 1-to-1 is super easy, right? Because you don't have to cook it, or you don't have to not necessarily cook it, but it just takes more water, stirring, dissolving, easy. But the 2-to-1 is it's 2 parts sugar to 1 part water, so it's thicker. So it just takes longer. Maybe it's just longer to stir, longer to dissolve. So
Yeah, maybe it's directional too. Pro Suite. So yeah, I buy a Pro Suite most of the time. So I'll get it I won't get the full thing filled. Yeah, I'll buy 100 gallons at a time. So only because I can't buy the full 265 in my tote, because then my truck, I think, would be on the ground because it's only a half ton. So, because at 100 gallons, that's 1,200 pounds, which is actually over what my truck's supposed to take, right? And you can feel it as you drive. You make a turn and there's a slow slosh that pushes it. You can feel it. So yeah, it's a little heavy for that. So, but if you go to Man Lake, you can buy it in 5-gallon buckets. If you bring the bucket yourself, you can have them, you go around the side of the building after you pay for it at the front, go around the side of the building, and they will fill up the 5-gallon buckets, and it's a fraction of the cost of that special.
$20 versus $70.
Yeah, it's a big difference in price. It's about $4. It's $4 a gallon.
Something like that. Yeah.
Something like that.
ask how many people are feeding right now, and what are they feeding?
How I'm supposed to ask the group at home, how many people at home are feeding now, and what are they feeding? And you can unmute yourself. Let's see, where's mine?
Well, after I'm done with the Apigard, I'm going to feed sugar syrup and pollen patties.
Which pollen patties?
I know, whatever is the box in my closet. Actually, I did read that Randy Oliver did a study of the pollen patties, and the ones that he said performed the best were this brand I've never heard of, and were pretty expensive. That it wasn't Man Lake anything. It was some other company. Global.
Mega Bee?
Global.
Global patties. I know Global. Yeah.
Of course you do.
Yeah.
Patties, but it was the low, like
Yeah.
4% stuff for.
Say again?
Ship it. It's interesting how they ship it to you.
Well, it seemed like you had to buy in bulk. I mean, like buy a lot of it. So maybe we can, as a club, buy a bunch of it, I guess. But it was something where just if you had a few hives, it wasn't going to be worth it.
Yeah, it's kind of like do I buy the Bee Pro or do I buy the Ultra Bee, right, from our local Man Lake, right?
Right.
NutriBee, and you can get that at Ryan's place. What
Sunrise.
in
Is he? I thought he
Oakdale.
was. I thought he was moving locations.
Is he? I haven't heard that.
That's last I heard that they had closed up where they were and they were moving someplace else.
There is
Oh.
somebody you can buy it online from, because.
It's made by one guy. That's the difference with the NutriBee. It's really great stuff.
Like a big 70-pound box. But I saw another place, I'll have to find it and post it on the website. You can buy it in actual patties at like 10 pounds.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
Are you guys speaking? Not yet. Oh, that's- Dave, are you
It's
speaking
from
your-
Mite.
No, no, not yet. I am getting ready to. I pick up a 25-pound bag of sugar and got a big pot, 4 or 5 gallons of water in it. Mix it all up and I get about 8.5 gallons out of it. And it goes fairly well.
Mark, you should talk about how you do the bucket thing. With the dry
oh yeah. Okay. So yeah, I used to have a bucket on the side on its side, right? And I'd put in like a Tupperware, and in the Tupperware I would have some dry Bee Pro, and the bees won't touch it. Well, they won't even touch it right now, because I've got some out right now in a different feeder. And then one day when you see them all over it, just all over it, like a cloud, that's when you find out that was the last pollen is now gone. The last flower with pollen is not available now. So then the bees switch, because now they're out looking for flowers, can't find it. That's coming up probably in a couple of weeks. All of a sudden, I'll probably post, hey, it's today, right? Anyway, so you put out your dry as an indicator too. So an indicator, oh, I should really have pollen patties on now. And then I leave the dry out. So I have a big blue feeder, the one that you can buy at Man Lake, the big thing, just because it can take the rain without getting it all messy. So I have one of those out, and I will get a good, I think it's a 50-pound bag of the dry, and I'll get the Ultra Bee stuff now, and I'll put it in there and I'll leave it. I can leave it for months in there, and all of a sudden one day they're all over it. But from like October until it gets too cold, they're in it like crazy. They just cover themselves in that stuff, taking it back to the hive. The difference between dry and patty is that the patty is utilized immediately, and they do not store it. So if you think that you're putting patties in there and they're going to set that pollen substitute, they don't. They eat it and then utilize it for whatever they're going to use that for. And that is mostly to make brood and to feed the queen who's laying eggs. The dry, though, they will actually store it. So if they go out and get the dry material, they'll store it in the hive, and then they'll have at least some sort of protein later from inside the hive. So the dry is not as good as the pollen substitute patty, and it won't be hit, it won't be consumed as quick. That's the beauty of putting the patties on. It used to be like in that part of spring where they still don't have enough food, you'd put a patty on and you can equate, this patty will turn into 1 frame of brood. And you can do those kind of calculations. And so that's why we'll do it now, is because I want the brood that they're making now to be as healthy as I can and as big as I can, rather than they're just trying to reproduce because they don't have anything and they're worried about dying a lot. So I want a different outcome, right?
Good deal. So let everybody know we're watching time.
We're watching time.
Any other thoughts on feeding or questions on feeding?
Any questions on feeding? I can talk about some of these feeders if you want.
Either that or we're gonna have to go to the queen right colony. I think unless there's no questions about the feeding. Do right. What do you do if you go in there and your queen?
There's probably a bunch of
People still have
questions.
questions, post them on the Big Valley.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
page.
See that, Mark?
If you've got questions, definitely post them on our Big Valley Beekeeping site webpage. Where the heck is the? Huh.
So
Okay.
what Man Lake pollen patty would you recommend then?
Ultra Bee.
Ultra Bee?
Yeah, they've kind of got a level that goes down from Ultra Bee. I don't know. I think it's the soft patties are probably next, and then the Bee Pro. Bee Pro are just cheap. They work fine though. I mean, between Bee Pro and not putting something in, Bee Pro every time. But the Ultra Bee has a better formulation. It's softer too. So there's one thing is nutrition and the other thing is performance.
Right.
Because you put the Bee Pro patties in and you could put a couple of cinder blocks on top and you'll have a hard time pressing them down. Whereas the Ultra Bee is pretty soft. I can put it on and then smash it down, right? Because
Right.
that's what that Nutri Bee stuff is amazing. It's so soft that you can put 4 pounds like brick and push it down and it'll go in between the frames, smushing down, and they'll consume it like that too. So that stuff I really do like, but it's hard to find. So the Ultra Bee is probably the best patty, especially for the club's use.
And then what do you use for the dry pollen?
I've been
Where do you
doing
get
the
that?
same. I used to just buy the cheap Bee Pro, but I just went ahead and bought the Ultra Bee bags for dry.
Oh, okay.
Hey, Mark,
Any other questions on feed?
how much
Yeah.
Ultra Bee or Pro Bee of the dry sub do you go through?
For me?
Well, okay, but you and then the average beekeeper.
Totally different, I think, because I've got them all in one spot. So I can probably go through a 50-pound bag of that stuff, but it's not as fast as you think. I mean, it's not like I keep scooping every day. It's only in there for a few weeks and I'll go through 50 pounds almost, right?
Okay. Okay. Well, I see there's like a 1 pound and then a 10 pound.
Like bag?
A pail, and then there's a 50-pound bag.
10 pound pail is what Paul's saying.
Okay.
I haven't even gone through half of it, so I think.
Lasts a long while. Yeah. And that's
Okay.
the-
Would you
can-
store that in the freezer or?
You could to keep it longer, but I don't think you need to. I mean, I've got my bag just sitting on the floor of my shop, cement floor. Think of a garage, right? Provided you don't have a mouse problem or anything like that. I live in the country, so mice are normal to have around. I still haven't had mice in the bag, so.
Okay,
whatever.
cool. Thank you.
So,
Tony, I got a question.
Sure, Ernie, go for it.
What's the best local supplier for these products in our area?
Probably Man Pro. There is a shop in Oakdale, but unfortunately it's been hit and miss with their hours and their days and their time. So they're not always reliable. But Man Pro and I think you can Man Lake, sorry, not Man Pro. Man Lake's probably the closest and they ship, which is nice. But if you call ahead to the store, they're super great there and they will hold things for you. And it's always a fun field trip. So.
Oh, that's in Oakdale. Okay, great.
No, Woodland. Man Lake is in Woodland.
Bad Lakes in Woodland. What's it? Is something in Oakdale? Isn't there a place in Oakdale?
There's a place in Oakdale, but they're pretty unpredictable. Yeah. Their hours are kind of wonky.
Okay. So Man Lake's in Woodland.
You'd have to call, yeah, Man Lake's in Woodland and in the Oakdale, I think it's called Sunrise Bee Supply. You could call them ahead and then and see when they're going to be there, make arrangements. Just in the past, their hours have been kind of unpredictable.
Yeah, Sheree, I think that they were moving locations, last I heard.
Oh, okay. So
So
yeah, Ernie, you'd want to definitely.
So I don't know if they're in a different place now, but I heard that they were opening up a new shop. So that's all I heard.
Got it. Thank you. So folks, we're looking at our time. We want to be able to wrap up and the restaurant is cleaning up behind us. You can probably see them on the camera. So we, so just one last thing. I know that Mark's going through his screenshots and pictures to see what else he can find. So something else that seems to come up as a problem is for people to make sure that they have queen right colonies going into the fall months and what you should do if you discover that she's missing. The reason for that is that right now there's not a lot of access to mated queens, right? You're going to be pretty hard pressed So any suggestions, or are there any, or just because of time, if you run into that problem, definitely post on the private group and we'll try to connect you with some resources. Anything else we want to say about that, about hive inspections this time of year and looking for queens and all that good stuff?
It kind of falls into the other ones. I mean, it actually goes backwards from inspections to look and see if you've got feed in there, right? You start to look and all you see is pollen, then you know that you need to feed, because that can be, you turn around and you look through and you're going frame after frame after frame. You either have brood and pollen or just brood, and you don't have anything else. They're all very light. They just look like wax comb. Then they've gone through all their food, and we're going to have that issue more than, am I doing it too close again? Anyone else. Our area probably worse than anyone else because we don't have enough rainfall. That even Southern California has rainfall at this time of year. They'll get a 1 or 2, so they'll still have flowers. We won't. And at the same time, we stay warm, warm, warm. And so they're just going to eat through what they have. And so that whole idea of, oh, I'll just give them enough, I'll just leave them alone and they'll have all the food they need. They won't, not our area. So that's where you're going to need to feed if they don't have any food, because they're not going to find it anywhere else. The only caveat to that, again, I keep bringing it up, is residential area, because people keep putting in flowers all year round. So you're going to have some sort of food. But in everywhere else, if you look out the window and you see grapes or you see horses or something, then you live in an area where there's not going to be any food for them. So if they don't have it, you need to add it. You should be looking at mites too, because that's what's going to look like a million different things. You see all the new beekeepers blaming this and blaming that. Do I have European foul brood? Do I have this and that? It's all mites every time. Okay, how do I do that?
Well, this is Chuck. I posted the telescope.
Any questions you guys have that you want to?
I saw that. Yes, thank you. I'm supposed to keep talking, so I'm just going to talk because I'm supposed to keep talking. I don't have anything to talk about. How am I doing?
Maybe also, Mark, maybe comment on like if you have hives that maybe are weaker, like when's your last time that they could combine weak colonies together?
Yeah. Yeah, that happens this time of year. Let's say you started the year with 2 hives and they didn't build up quickly enough where you think they're going to make it on their own. It's always a good idea to maybe try and combine those hives. I just learned a lesson this year. I had 2 hives that I combined, and I had the hive that was queen right had just requeened. It was a nice looking queen. I put the other hive on top of that one, and I went in to check the other day. They had killed the queen, the original queen, and there were 3, 4, 5 queen cells. So now I have to let them do that whole thing and hope that queen gets mated well. I think there's still time. I think there's still enough drones. But if you're going to combine hives, it's not a bad idea. If you're worried, that's the first time it's happened. I've probably combined hives 10 times, and that's the first time I've lost a queen. Maybe in the future, I might cage the queen and before I combine, and then give it a few days and then let the queen out. Lesson learned.
But kind of like at this time of year, when is like the last opportunity you would have to combine hives? I mean, like is October too late? Is November too late?
Yeah, and if something happens to one of your queens right now,
yeah, it's
good
slim
luck,
pickings.
because
Yeah.
I think Oliveris is still selling queens, and I think Honeybee Genetics may still have queens, but I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't. The last I checked, it was about a week or so ago, and they did, but
Yeah.
they could anytime say no more queens. Oh,
Thanks, Paul.
next meeting.
Sorry, guys, we're gonna get kicked out of the restaurant because they're staring us down. So we're gonna go. So if you have any questions, please let us know. Please post in the group, or you're welcome to email us. And but otherwise, our next meeting is going to be on Thursday, October 14th. And we are going to do the honey tasting. So please, this will probably not be a Zoom meeting. We're going to do it in person here in the restaurant. We're going to use the full restaurant. So so we'll look for your emails, look for more information as that's coming through. So, all right. Anything else to add, folks? No, I think we're good. All right, everybody, have a great month ahead, and definitely post if you have any further questions that come up. All right. Thanks.
Thank you.